let me give you the most simple example, how sunspots vary over the cycle. We have an automated recognition now. So all you have to do is just give a couple of commands on your computer, download those data, and make a graph. Well, in the past, since Galileo actually, people have been observing sunspots every day and then carefully putting their observations in notebooks, handwritten until recently. And therefrom you then reconstruct the data of sunspot as a function of time. And that's how we know there's an 11-year cycle. That has been going on for the last 4 centuries at least.
The sun's magnetic field, is it true that it's weakened some? A little bit?
It weakened a lot during the last solar minimum. They were so deep and so long, but now it's coming back.
How does it come back?
Well, there are sunspots again, and with these sunspots, you see active regions and X-rays and extreme ultraviolet, and you see solar flares happening again, some big ones recently, and coronal mass ejections, which are these big ejections from the surface of the sun that can go straight to Earth and then really create havoc. So all these activities are now in a rising phase again.
What are your concerns about coronal mass ejections and solar flares? Do you have any?
My concerns? Well, not so much concerns. I think just like weather, we need to be able to both track them and, if possible, predict them because they have a lot of negative influences on Earth. For example, in March 89, there was a huge solar flare and coronal mass ejections that came to the Earth and actually knocked out the power grid in all of northeast of the U.S. and the east coast of Canada. So New York City was without power for a short time. That's, of course, pretty significant. And what happened was that actually the coronal mass ejection coming from that huge flare induced a small electric field in the power grid that turned out to be a huge voltage because the distances are so large, and that broke down a whole series of power transfer stations, and the whole system collapsed. And of course, it took a while for the power utilities to accept or even want to consider that could possibly be the sun that's causing this, but it is. And so now they're interested in predictions of these events so they can prepare for it and take measures to protect their grid.
Pete, do you think that it's possible to prepare for this type of activity?
There's a lot you can do. For example, spacecraft that have high voltages in them, when they get hit by a CME, that instrument may break down. So what you do, even if you know a big CME is coming, you just power down the voltages temporarily and save your, billion-dollar spacecraft that way. Other things is people who are in airplanes going on polar routes. Like, for example, when you go from New York to Bombay, you go almost over the pole. When there's a big solar flare, you get enhanced radiation, X-rays, on these polar routes because that's the part that's open to the high-energy particles. And what airlines do when there's a large chance of a big solar flare, they reroute their airplanes to a more southerly route where they're protected from the radiation. And that costs them money, of course, because it's a longer trip and so more fuel. But they have to do that for the safety of the passengers and the pilots.
That's pretty profound. I have been from New York to Bombay.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
So that's an interesting route.
Yeah, and there's several of them now. There's New York to Hong Kong, I believe, that goes over the pole. And from Europe going to Japan, you go almost over the pole, etc. So that number of connections is increasing.
Do you think that the coronal mass ejection can destroy the grid in the United States?
Yeah, if we didn't do anything. Yeah, definitely. Now that we're having at least they're developing a smart grid now where the transmissions are constantly monitored, so they'd be better able to shut it down on a short notice, which is good. Not entirely shut it down, but shut down big connections, large distance connections.
What you're describing may be a good thing. The only thing I'm not happy about with the smart grid is it's too much microwave energy in people's homes. Too much.
Really?
Yep.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. People are getting sick from them, and a lot of people are fighting those smart grids, the way that they're operating and the way they're being set up.
You're talking about things in the home. I think what I'm talking about is the people who control the delivery to your home.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about solar flares. A lot of people are very afraid, and there's a lot of propaganda about 2012.
Oh, yeah.
And not to really get into that, but what would a solar flare do to us on Earth?
Well, not much, because we're protected by the atmosphere. So a solar flare sends out high-energy particles and high-energy radiation, up to gamma rays even, which are really bad for life. But we have the magnetosphere around the Earth, which is a magnetic field of the Earth itself, that deflects those high-energy particles, so they don't make it through the atmosphere. And then the atmosphere of the Earth, in particular the ozone layer, absorbs the high-energy photons. So the X-rays and the UV rays are absorbed by mostly the ozone layer. That's important. That's why it's important we keep that. Now that the ozone layer has weakened over the South Pole and less or so over the North Pole, there is indeed more UV radiation coming through the atmosphere there. And you can see it in the southern tip of South America where animals are affected by it.
How? Describe it.
You get too much UV radiation, eyes can go bad, they get blisters on their eyes, and the DNA in the cells in your body can be destroyed, so you can get defective offspring that way.
Where in South America have you heard this?
The southern tip of South America, so it would, at the point where Chile and Argentina almost reach the South Pole. That's where the ozone layer has been weakened over Antarctica, so they got a little bit more of UV radiation, and they've seen the effect. But the ozone layer is actually recovering at the moment, thanks to the Montreal Protocol, so I think we may dodge this bullet, I hope.
I hope so, too. I heard several years back that NASA had discovered, is it the magnetosphere that had a hole in it? I don't know the exact region, but
there's an anomaly. There's a weak spot in it, which we call the South Atlantic Anomaly, SAA, and it's a little bit east of the coast of Brazil. When spacecraft go through that region, they actually experience enhanced solar particles again and solar radiation that can interrupt the observations.
You have a very different kind of a life, don't you?
Different from what?
Well, different from the average bear. The kind of projects that you're involved in are intergalactic.
Right. Well, yeah, this is the kind of research I like doing, and moreover, there's funding available for it because it has relevance to society. So it's important to know it. So NASA initiated this program, Living with a Star, about 10 years ago, which tries to exactly address these issues that where solar variations influence life on Earth in many ways. So we talked about climate change, and we also talked about solar flares and variations in the Earth's atmosphere through solar radiation, etc.
Now, you're using this technology in these 16 different programs to bring something about with regard to diagnosing or identifying breast cancer. Is that correct?
No, yeah. Actually, it's the other way around.
Okay.
The techniques that have been developed for diagnosing breast cancer are similar techniques that I use actually in the module I work on myself to detect features on the sun. So what's happened is the medical community has developed methods to look at X-ray images of breasts to detect tumors. And what they do, a doctor will look at your X-ray and say, okay, you're okay, or there's some concern about this or this in the breast. But what they do now is these same X-rays are then also analyzed by computer, and the computer will detect the diseased parts. So, and if there's a difference between the diagnosis of the doctor and the computer, then there will be some output, and the computer basically saying, please look at that again. And it's very important, of course, because if a doctor makes a mistake, that could be a death sentence for a person.
Well, so many of them do make mistakes and kill so many people. Have you heard of breast thermography?
Yeah, I think I've read about it.
It's the safest form to date of identifying if there's any tumors in the breast.
Without X-rays.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. So do you look
extremely accurate. I've been doing it for years.
Oh, okay.
No X-rays into the breast to find out what's going on.